think we're close to good. Welcome. Pre-engaged couples, at least. That's a good deal. How are you guys doing? Who's got Paul? Go back and get that baby and bring him. Mine are at the house. I left Jackie with Rowan chasing me around. When she wants to be picked up, she does this. And she was following me around in a little toddler walker, doing this. And I said, baby, I got to go. I can't pick you up. And she'll be one in August. So she's not hardly as old as Paul is. And Gunnar is 20 months, I think. Real close to being. I get in trouble at all kind of lectureships because when they ask you to speak like at Freed, you have to send them your manuscript. And I don't think in manuscript form. I've been asked to write several books for Gospel Advocate, and they want 13 lessons. And I don't think in 13 lessons. So what you've got is kind of this bullet list. And if you could speak for 10 minutes on each of those topics there, then you could open up your own private practice as a therapist, because that's all the accumulated wisdom from some of the books. And I'll give you a reading list as we go through. I'm so glad you guys decided to take part of your Saturday and come in today. Cover some basic stuff. Our exits are here. In the event of some catastrophe, let's just all meet by the front sign. That way we can account for all of our bodies. That way if we scatter like a covey of quail, at least we'll be able to say, hey, we're missing somebody or we're not. Restrooms are straight out the back in the unair-conditioned part of the building. And then there's a VBS work group. Our Vacation Bible School is starting in a couple of days, so there'll be some children that don't belong to you running around and some other moms and stuff. At our first break, I bought some snacks and put them on a table in our fellowship hall. I'm not allowed to eat sugar. And so when I walked into the Dollar General, I went, if I could have something, what would I have? So it may or may not appeal to you, but I got, cream cakes and moon pies and fudge rounds and all those things that I can't have. One cooler has diet drinks, one cooler has regular soft drinks, and I thought, surely at 10 o'clock nobody needs coffee. But that may or may not be the case. It's good. It all has caffeine. And no off-brand stuff, Rick. It's all mainline, We have a running joke at our place. People bring Dr. Thunder to a fellowship meal. Spend the extra $1 and get the brand name is what we do. Since we have an eclectic group, I would like for you to, if you're comfortable, introduce either yourself or be the spokesperson for your family and say, this is us, and we're either engaged or we've been married this long. Just kind of a real brief history. If you want to, tell us how you met, which I always find to be fascinating. And we'll start with I guess we'll start right here. Excellent. Good deal. Mason. Wow. Very cool. All right. Jacksonville, Alabama? Oh, wow. Okay, I grew up in Oxford. And so, well, I'm not going to say that. Anyway, we're glad you're here. Go Eagles, anyway.
This is my wife, Tila, and I'm Daniel. And we met at West Huntsville. We've been married for 23 years. We actually, I think we came to a youth rally that you had probably here at one of the congregations when we were dating.
Wow. Okay.
Some odd years ago.
It's been a few years, yeah.
So we're from the Grant congregation. We're with this group here.
Excellent. And so you guys are from Grant?
We are.
All right, well, I live in Gurley. And when I go home, I go over Grant Mountain. And I've climbed a few rocks up there. The Pence place has a little bluff on the side of the river. Nanette Pence and her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then
Did you came to our Cliff House? We had a marriage retreat there. Probably been 15, 17 years ago. You remember that?
I've been to the Cliff House too, yeah. There's a bluff up there I want to climb, but just never been able to get back up around that area. And somebody has a sinkhole up there, Ed Parks. I took his grandkids rappelling in this sinkhole. I tried to get him to let me build a ropes course across it. And you know how Parks is. He's kind of tight anyway. But yeah, I've been all over Grant Mountain. That's cool.
Jerry Martin is my wife. We go to their congregation with them. We've been married for 8 years. We have 2 sons, 14 and 12. And we met through my best friend was going to church. I just got back from Auburn. He asked me to church with him, and then he offered lunch, and that was a no-brainer on my lunch. So I went to church with him with his wife, worked with my wife, and we started going out.
So was it a setup? Was it actually a setup?
Yes, it was actually planned.
Good deal.
I needed to find a good girl, and she said I worked with somebody, so we started dating and started going to church with her. And so I'll go with you on Sunday mornings, ain't no Sunday youth time, and then started coming in here and realized that I had to change.
Glad that worked out. Good deal.
I'm Taylor Stegall. This is my fiance Lonnie. We actually met in the gym, and we've also been engaged since
I'm Levi Sellers. This is my girlfriend, Kristen Phillips. 2 years. We met at
Then he says, my house, and we put together almost 6 years.
Which church camp? Okay.
Joanna Smith. This is my wife, Adriana. We met while I was supposed to read the church. This is our home congregation. We had one more, and nobody cared about us.
Now, you were down there on a mission trip, right? Okay. And that's where you met Adriana while you were out on a mission trip. Cool. All right.
My name is Connor Ware. This is my wife Cheryl. We met 4 years ago at CYC. Started talking together not so much, and a few months later we got married.
And Connor's a preaching student at Southeast. Yeah, Southeast Institute of Biblical Studies. There you go. Yeah. And CYC is a large youth gathering that gathers people from all over the Southeast. Yeah, some group of guys. That's funny. Go ahead.
I'm with Michael Austin. My wife, Sarah. We've been actually a year and 9 months. We were married. Been dating for about 3 years. Knew each other for longer than that. Before we started dating, we met in June.
Oh, really? So you know Connor?
Yes.
Because Connor does judo. He's a judokan.
Same place.
Very, very cool. Is that with William Scripture?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No, we don't hate. We all know Will.
This is Jessica. My name is Jason. We've been married 12 years tomorrow, and we met at Free Garden.
My name is Rick Shines. This is my wife, Lori. We were married 28 years this July 14th. And we met for high school.
They were in my youth group, and I did their wedding. Rick is one of our elders. at the congregation here, and they a group of men who shepherd our flock and support our activities and stuff. And glad you guys are here this morning.
I'm Mike Evans. This is my wife Cindy. We've been married for 19 years. We met right after her husband passed with 4 boys. It's been a blessing. God gave us.
Excellent.
She's 17. She'll teach it.
One of their boys is Josh Cochran, right? Josh is a firefighter, and he and his wife Amy were in my youth group. They got married on the opening day of dove season. I said, that's already out of control. I showed up at the building in camouflage and with dead birds in the car. Went in the office, changed, and walked out in my tux pants, my vest, and my camouflage jacket. And Amy goes like, oh, wrong jacket. I went back in. And I've always teased them about getting married on the opening day of dove season. Well, we killed dove before and after the wedding, I'm just saying.
I'm Bill, my wife Kathy. We've been married 15 years in August. We met at where we work, and she was the one that asked me to marry her.
Kathy is retired law enforcement and used to be at the police academy. And one of the first times I ever ran 5 miles, it was being encouraged or intimidated, I don't know which, by Kathy while we were out there doing some stuff. And I'm glad you guys are here. My name's Lonnie. Jackie and I have been married 33 years. We met in Arkansas. I was a preaching student and got assigned to this group of people called the SWAT team, which is crazy. It stood for Students Working and Teaching. And I had to go out to this little church in Velvet Ridge, Arkansas, and teach classes and preach for them. And my wife was a student there. I didn't actually meet her on campus. I met her at this little church. And when she got old enough to date, I asked her out. And we got married and moved here in '86. If you look at your handouts that we gave you, and I tend to be in lecture mode. This is what I do for a living. I'll probably speak at about 40 events a year. And then Monday through Thursdays, I spend time talking to couples in my office. So if I get to talking, I may just talk and not stop. And so if you have a question or want to add something to it, I want this to be super, super informal. We did the, hey, this is who we are and how we met, how long we've been married, so y'all go ahead.
Hey, I'm Christy. This is Kyle. We've been married 23 years, and we met on the playground in first grade.
Good enough. So, so if I get started and you want me to stop, you can tap out or raise a hand or whatever if you need to make comments or need clarification. I like this little thing here called the marriage go-round. Let me read you a Bible story first, and we'll talk about that. Jacob is one of 2 brothers born to Isaac. Isaac is the son and heir of Abraham. And in the Old Testament lineage, Abraham said, I'm going to bless you and bless your descendants. And something, and I've not really read in it, we don't get a lot of explanation, but there seems to be this blessing that can be passed on from father to son. And it's like once you pass the blessing on, it's passed and can't be undone. There's no redos. Well, Jacob is younger of the 2 twins by seconds. But he and his mother fool their father, and he gets the blessing. And because he gets the blessing, his older brother Esau decides, I'd probably kill him, so he runs away. And so while he's running away from home and he's an expatriate carrying out the blessing of God, he meets this farmer, a sheep owner named Laban, and decides, hey, I'll work for you. And so he's kind of on the lam and he's working for this guy. So Genesis chapter 29. After Jacob had stayed with Laban a whole month, Laban said to him, just because you're a close relative of mine, you should not work for nothing. Tell me what your wages should be. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older daughter was Leah, and the name of the younger daughter was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes. That's a Hebrew idiom, and it ain't flattering. Okay? It basically means she's probably not going to be on the cover of any magazines. Or if you put her picture in the garden, it would not only run off the crows, it would make them bring back stuff they stole last year. Okay? So you've got a smoking hot daughter, and you've got this other one, all right? He had 2 daughters, Leah had weak eyes, and Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. Now, I don't know why you have to say lovely in form and beautiful, but something in the Hebrew probably means she was the total package. She's rocking everything, all right? And so she's the more attractive of the two sisters. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said to Laban, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel. You talk about a love story. This guy says, I'll pledge myself to her and I'll work for 7 years and if you'll let me marry her. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel. But they seemed only like a few days to him because of his love for her. Again, one of those hallmark moments. All right. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is complete. I want to lie with her. Which means that during the 7 years they were together, no hanky-panky going on. So this has been, he's been here for 7 years in love with this girl and kept his hands off of her. And so he's ready to consummate the marriage. He's ready to be intimate. He wants his wife. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob. And Jacob lay with her, and Laban gave his servant girl Zilpah to his daughter as a handmaid servant. And when the morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is it you've done to me? I've served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? Laban said, it is not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, and then we'll give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. So now I'm not sure what went on at this marriage feast. I'm not sure what went on with this party. I'm not sure if just because they don't have electric lights. But you go into your honeymoon tent thinking you've got Rachel, and you wake up and it's, Leah. Expectation versus reality. And all marital dissatisfaction comes from coming into marriages with a preconceived set of expectations. Now, most of us don't recognize we have preconceived expectations because our perspective is our perspective, right? You ever met anybody that just got glasses that didn't know they needed them? We had a neighbor named Nelda Bradford, and she said that when she got glasses and put them on for the first time, she goes, trees have leaves. As a little kid, you don't know that you can't see. You think everybody sees what you're seeing. And she said trees were big fuzzy green things. And the first time she put her glasses on, she could see the individual leaves. So you come from a family of origin. You come of a tradition of marriage. You come from watching your parents interact or not interact or whatever. And in the back of your mind, you may not even realize it. You have some non-conscious meanings that say, hey, this is what marriage is going to be like. And when expectation doesn't meet reality, that's considered a grief. The American Academy of Bereavement defines it as such. When life does not turn out like I expect it to, I suffer loss, and humans grieve all losses. So you come into marriage with, this is what it's going to be like, and then you run into reality, and depending on how big the gap is between expectation and reality, that's where your conflicts start. And so I love this little chart called the marriage go-round. I heard my buddy Tim Orbison talk about this. So if you look at that first handout, you basically start off with romance. And you can talk to the folks who've been married 12 years plus and talk to the folks who are engaged and find out the differences of what's marriage going to be like. Are we going to fight? Are we going to have conflicts? Are we always going to get along? And they'll go, oh yes, it's wonderful. And then the folks who've been married a little bit of time realize, hey, there's two flawed human beings living in the same house. And what happens? Expectation doesn't meet reality. So you first start out with romance, and then when romance runs into reality, you have several options there. So you run into reality and there's a disappointment. Prince Charming falls off his horse. Prince Charming is still a frog. Cinderella is not the princess at the ball. Okay, she's not wearing glass slippers. She's wearing flip-flops and a terry cloth robe. And all of a sudden, here's romance and now here's reality. So you can do a couple of things. Your first choice is what I call lemons, lemonade, and buttercups. What happens when life gives you lemons? You make lemonade. But you still have what? Lemons. You just put sugar and water with them, but you still have lemons. Buttercup is the last phrase, the last part of the phrase, suck it up, buttercup. Okay? Or we had a guy that worked with the police department who was our team leader with the SWAT group that I'm a chaplain for. And on PT days, he would wear this shirt that said, "Embrace the suck." Okay? So it's terrible, it's miserable, you don't like it, but you know what? You just have to deal with it. That's a bad place to live. You get into a marriage, and it's not what you thought it would be, and this is the best I can do with what I've got. I'm just going to suck it up and endure. That's no fun for anybody. Or some folks say, hey, this was what I expected. This is reality. I don't like it. I'm done. And they divorce and cycle back into romance. And their life is a revolving pattern of failed relationships because every time expectation doesn't meet reality, they just cash out. I don't think either of those two options is a good thing. I don't think that life is about, hey, let's just endure the suck. Let's just endure the bad news. Let's just, endure the bad stuff. So what happens is when romance runs into reality, and depending on how severe the gap is between romance and reality or expectation and reality, you may have more or less work to do, but you start skill building. And I want to spend part of the day talking about the skills that we can build. And once you learn skills in anything and practice them, and marital skills are like any other skills, you got to practice them to get good at them. A lot of skills that you do are counterintuitive. Skills that you do for balance, skills that you do to throw a football, skills that you do to throw a baseball. All kind of things are contrary to our nature, but once you learn them, once you practice them, then you move into where love becomes an attitude, and you develop what I call the covenant mind. Anybody know what a covenant is? Anybody familiar with the term covenant? It's an agreement. God makes a covenant with Israel. They put their covenant in a box. What was that box called? The Ark of the... Why'd they call it that? It contained the covenant. They need a better marketing guy. Okay, what's that? That's the Ark of the Covenant. What's in it? The covenant. Duh. All right. So God, and when you see Moses coming down from the mountain with 2 stone tablets, it's not commandments 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. 10 commandments on one, 10 commandments on the other. It's a contract. Your copy, my copy. But God's relationship with Israel was not contractual. It was covenant. Now, what's the difference between a contract and a covenant? A contract can be broken. A covenant can also be broken. Okay? What's the difference in breach of contract and somebody breaking a covenant? Pardon? Maybe emotion. Yeah, contracts are pretty much emotionless. You sign on the dotted line, and we leased some property years ago on Kill Mountain to run our ropes course. And just kind of as a byline on the very last paragraph of the very last page, it said, should this property be inactive for 2 weeks, the landowner gains rights and access to all equipment, all structures, and the business. Well, I didn't sign that because I knew I was going to be at least off 2 weeks that summer to go somewhere. But he had just written in, and it didn't matter what I felt about it, didn't matter what I cared about it. Had I signed that piece of paper and taken a 2-week vacation, he would have owned my company. He would have owned my ropes course. So covenants are emotionless. And if you break any little part of it, the contracts are emotionless. If you break any little part of it, it's broken. The direct TV guys. We'll be at your house sometime between 1 and 5. You can't make a better appointment than that. Well, I'm that guy. I'm in a mood. When I take the day off, I don't get paid. I'm self-employed. And I sit at my house from 1 to 5. At 5:01, guess what happened to our contract? He's going home. I'm not doing business with him. A covenant is not like a contract because a contract is just law. Covenant is law combined with love. In fact, those of you who sing some older church songs, there's a song in our books that says law and love combining. And if I love you and you break the contract as part of a covenant, I can give you a pass. God's relationship with Israel, they always violated the terms of the covenant, and God always did what? Kept them, brought them back, kept them in. So when you develop a covenant mindset, it's here's expectation, here's reality. Things aren't perfect, but I'm going to serve this relationship with an attitude rather than a law. And I'm going to serve this with an attitude rather than emotion. And love is an attitude. It's a choice, not just an emotion. Now, love starts out with the emotion. You know, you feel a feeling you feel when you feel a feeling you felt that you never felt before. Okay, but that doesn't last long. Okay? It fades pretty quickly after the romance phase. And so you choose, I'm going to love this person. Hey, you choose to love a 2-year-old. You choose to love a 14-year-old girl. Okay? They're demon-possessed at some point in their lives. And you make a choice. I'm going to choose, well, you can choose to love an adult. And so when you begin to start talking about the biblical concept of the covenant mindset, it's that I'm going to choose to make this work even on the bad days, and especially on the bad days. And then when you start looking, if you look at the next page of your handout, you'll notice some things that have to do with attitude. Appreciation, spending time together, commitment, communication, spiritual wellness, and the ability to deal with crisis. And I put in parentheses, discipline issues as crisis, because most of you that get married are going to have kids, and some of the biggest discipline problems you'll have, or crisis issues you'll have, is with disciplining your children. And so you think about, in your relationship, how much appreciation do you show one another? Is your life full of thank yous? Is your life full of showing each other that you're glad they're in your life? Or do you begin at some point in your relationship to take each other for granted? Spend time around a couple that you get a sense of that they appreciate even the little bitty things in life. And we'll talk about bids for affection. Bidding for affection in a relationship. The key moments in relationships are not the moments that you think. John Gottman, in his research, they had this thing in Seattle, Washington called the Love Lab, and they would let you stay in their apartment for a 3-day weekend, and they would observe you. That just sounds ultimately creepy to me. But they were watching these people interact, and they almost were unable to complete their study because it was so boring they couldn't get people to go watch. He was like, this is mind-numbing. You know, there had to be some poor graduate student doing this. But after years of compilation of their work, what they began to notice was that the strongest couples do this exchange called bidding for affection. And it's not these John Marcia moments. It's, hey, I'm walking to the mailbox. You want to walk with me? Hey, look at this thing on YouTube. Hey, come here and watch this commercial. Hey, I'm getting a glass of tea. You want one of those? And strong couples had appreciation in exchange of bids for affection as frequently as about 60 times an hour, where they weren't just in the house, but they were entwined in each other's lives. And it's little bitty moments, little bitty things, like walking to the mailbox and sitting on the porch and bring me a cup of coffee. And you'll notice that couples who are in trouble, when someone offers a bid for affection, they either turn away from that bid or they turn against that bid. And strong couples have a higher frequency of, number one, just bidding exchanges, and people turn toward those bids. And that's appreciation, and then spending time together and good communication all end up being part of the attitude of love. And then you boil down to this attitude of commitment. What does commitment mean to you? Not giving up when times get hard. That's probably succinct as you can put it. I got asked several years ago, Camp Coca-Cola was formed. The Coke Corporation then in Atlanta wanted to build a signature program like the Ronald McDonald houses. You know, so McDonald's gets all this noise about, Ronald McDonald houses, it's good marketing. And so Coke decided we want to do a signature program, and we're going to start this signature program called Camp Coca-Cola. And they bought a girls' I think it's a Girl Scout camp over in Georgia, out near Juliet Low. I think it's Camp Juliet Low, actually. And they threw money at it. I mean, it's unbelievable. They wired it for internet. They made it Wi-Fi compatible. They picked 72 kids from inner city Atlanta. They had to have a reference from school, a reference from a minister. And they brought these kids to this camp for 6 weeks. They outfitted them with hiking equipment, backpacking equipment. I mean, if you made this cut, they gave you the stuff. And then the plan was to do 6 weeks with these 72 kids, and the next summer split that group in half, and half of that number would mentor another new group, and half of that number would mentor another group, and they have a 12-week camp called Camp Coca-Cola. Well, they wanted to do a ropes course, and so they called me and hired me to come do the first ropes course for Camp Coca-Cola. And so I got to go in and train their staff on it, and then I got to go back like, I think 13 times that summer and do programs with actually the students, the high stuff and the low stuff. And so we were doing a low course element called a trust fall. And a trust fall is you get up on a platform, and the people below the platform stand facing each other, and you put your hands like this, and you enter every other hand. We call it a zipper line. And so the little kid stands up on top of the platform, he sticks his hands out like this, he rolls it up, and then he says, "Spotter's ready," and they all yell, "Ready." He yells, "I'm falling." They yell, "Fall on 3." He counts to 3, and you just lean back, and they catch you. And it's cool. I've done it with, thousands of people probably. So I've got these 7th graders from Camp Coca-Cola on this platform, and we're talking about the stuff. And I can see through the pine trees these guys in suits. It's July in Georgia, and these dudes are walking through the woods in suits. So I know they're corporate. I'm in camouflage pants and a T-shirt, and here the suits are from Atlanta to see what this whole ropes course thing is about. We get these kids lined up, and they're doing a trust fall. Well, this little guy falls off this thing, and when you fall off a trust fall, there's a point about right here where you recognize, I can't stop this bus. Mr. Gravity never sleeps. There's a point where once you initiate an action, it's not going to go away. And then there's a place right about here where you feel like, okay, they should have caught me by now. And it's like, those fools let me go. And so this little guy starts off this thing, and instead of keeping in his tucked position, he unwraps and jacks this dude. I mean, glasses sitting sideways, his nose is bleeding, he got blood pouring everywhere, and and we're surrounded by suits now. The corporate guys, they're thinking, call the lawyers, all this stuff. And so I got to do something with this disaster. So I just start debriefing it. I said, okay, the reason we ask you to roll your arms up like that is so you don't sling them outside the vehicle while the vehicle is moving. And I said, look, you broke this guy's nose. I said, why didn't you move when he unfolded his arms? And a little bitty dude, Asian-looking little kid, said, I promised to stand here regardless of what he did. That's huge. That's a commitment. I made a promise to stand right here. If he keeps his arms folded, if he doesn't fold his arms, if he swings his arms, if he doesn't. I made a promise to stand here, and it had nothing to do with his behavior. It had everything to do with my commitment. And from that time forward, when we debrief a trust fall, we don't talk about, do you trust people enough to fall, but can you be trusted? And out of that came another thing. If you take a group of at-risk kids and you ask them, does it scare you more to fall or to be caught, or to catch? At-risk groups 100% of the time go, I have trouble trusting other people. I don't want them to drop me. Don't want them to let me down. You ask a group of cops, you ask a group of leaders, you ask a group of high-power folks who are successful in life, what makes you more nervous, falling or catching someone? To the person, they say, it makes me more nervous to catch somebody because they don't want to fail the other person. I made a commitment to stand here and deliver. And so strong marriages not only have this sense of bidding for affection and the appreciation and the communication, but they have a sense of commitment that I'm not in this if, and I'm not in this when. It's I'm in this, and your behavior really doesn't get to dictate what I do with my commitment. And then we talk about spiritual wellness, and I can't emphasize enough that you get on the same page spiritually. And religiously mixed couples, one who goes, one who doesn't, one's Protestant, one's Catholic, in any shape that you get a religious mix in a couple, the survival rate is very poor. 1 out of every 10 people who try to climb Everest don't make it. In fact, that's one of my great anti-motivational posters. The body of Mount Everest, the slopes of Mount Everest are littered with the bodies of people who were once highly motivated. You know, you get some guy talking, you can do it. I like to point out that fact. But if 10 people try to climb Everest, one won't come back. That's the statistic overall in the history of the mountain. It's not the most dangerous mountain on the planet. Annapurna is an actual technical rock climb, and 1 in 4 don't make it on that. But Everest is basically a glorified hike. But 1 in 10 don't come back from Everest. 7 out of every 10 religiously mixed marriages struggle, if not fail. Okay? And I consider that to be huge. You got a better chance of walking up into the death zone and coming back than you do being in a religiously mixed marriage. So if your tradition is different, or if you're not as committed as one another, there's a potential for problem there with the spiritual wellness. And then the ability to deal with crisis. And we'll talk about crisis as we progress in our seminar. Any questions or comments or follow-up or clarification so far? All right, so let's talk about biblical intimacy. Let's talk about the idea of togetherness. Look at Matthew 19 if you have a Bible. If not, and I know you may not have expected so much scripture. Matthew 19:9. Well, let's start at 19:1. Jesus is dealing with just questions and answers. And so chapter 19, verse 1. Jesus finished these sayings. He left Galilee and went to the region of Judea. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Now some Pharisees came to him to test him. So there's already this is intellectually dishonest. Okay, this is a loaded question. Okay, it's like every time the media deals with Trump. Okay, they don't really want to know what the answer is. They want to find an aha moment or I got you moment. Okay, so they ask him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? If you've got a King James Bible, it'll say for just any reason. If you've got some other translations, it may say for any reason. If you have a King James version, I think and even an ASV, the just is italicized. And anytime you read italicized words in the text, they've been added by the translator because they want you to understand the nature of this question. In the New Testament, the time between the end of the covenant and the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem, or the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem in the temple, you got about 400 years where there's really nothing going on except a lot of political upheaval. And during that time, 4 factions formed among the Jewish people. You had a group of folks that were known as the Essenes. And without being disparaging, the Essenes were your Amish Jews. Okay? They didn't want their kids to learn to speak Greek. They didn't live inside the city. They lived outside in a little community called Qumran. They ate the traditional foods of the Jews. They wanted their children to speak and read Hebrew. We think these are the people who preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls. And when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, there was a copy of the book of Isaiah that was 1,500 years older than anything we currently had. And there were 3 letters different. These are hand copied, and there were 3 letters different, not words, letters different in the entire scroll of Isaiah. So these guys were purist. So you have the Essenes. You have a group of guys called the Zealots. The Zealots were your concealed carry Jews. Okay, they were a political faction that wanted the Messiah to be a military leader and kick the Romans out. The city of Jerusalem had been occupied by the Roman forces and several other groups, and they thought that when the Messiah come, he was going to be a military leader. So these guys, would have had a Star of David with a rebel flag in the middle. Don't tread on me, and when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. When Jesus does the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday, and the group is standing there yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna. We use Hosanna as a praise term. In the original language, it means save now. It was their equivalent to our let's roll. Jesus is riding into town. It's Passover weekend. Passover was when God freed the Israelites from the Egyptians 1,500 years earlier. And so you've got this crowd standing there saying, let's do it. Let's go to war. Hosanna, Hosanna. And so those were your zealots. Then you have a group of guys called the Sadducees. Sadducees were rich. They controlled the temple treasury. They were in league with the Romans, kind of bought and sold the high priesthood. They did not believe in the afterlife. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in demons. They didn't believe in resurrection. They only believed that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy were inspired. They didn't believe the rest of the Old Testament had the breath of God in it. And then you run into this group of guys called the Pharisees. Pharisees were super, super strict in their religious tradition. They believed that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy were inspired. They believed the wisdom literature was inspired. They believed the Psalms were inspired. And a man will leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. When they asked Jesus this question, he doesn't go to the saying of the rabbis. He doesn't go to the camp of Shemaiah or Hillel. He says, since you are experts in what is written in the law, haven't you read it? And he goes all the way back to the Creator. He jumps the law of Moses, jumps the studies of the rabbis, goes all the way back to, I think the very first book of the Bible says, what God has joined together, you don't let anybody separate. Notice what he said, the two become one. This is super important for you to engage, guys. If biblical math is not 1 plus 1 equals 2. Biblical math is not 1/2 plus 1/2 equals a whole. Okay? Two healthy people share a relationship. And if you're in a relationship and one of you is not completely healthy, spiritually, psychologically, or emotionally, the other person's not going to fix that. Now, there's nothing wrong if you decide, hey, I'm going to sign up for that. But you marry a partner, not a project. 1/2 plus 1/2 does not equal a whole. You don't say, I'm unfulfilled and I'm going to find somebody to fulfill me. If I take 2 halves of a hammer, and those 2 halves are basically handles, I ain't got a whole hammer when I put them together, do I? I got this really weird looking handle thing. 2 healthy people get married. It's not, I'm going to get married and fix myself. I'm not going to get married and fix you. It's a healthy person plus a healthy person equals a special unit. 2 people become one. That's biblical intimacy. In the 2 plus 1 phenomenon, yeah, AJ's trying to bring me some batteries. The 2 plus 1 phenomenon is the idea that a lot of couples and a lot of single people are super, super unhappy because their expectation was, when I get married, it's going to fix my happiness. If you're not happy when you're dating, you're not going to be happy when you're married. If you're not satisfied with you while you're dating, you're not going to be satisfied with you after you're married. And so understanding that the biblical math is 2 equals 1, and that 2 equals 1 is really a discussion of intimacy. Now, do you remember the old food pyramid from grammar school? The triangle thing, you had to draw that? Everybody remember what the 4 foods groups were? Pizza, ice cream, Twinkies. What? Okay, so you had this food pyramid, and it had these levels. Okay, so at the top of my marriage pyramid, I have love, and that's the attitude, not the emotion. It's the choice. It's the commitment. It's I'm going to stand here regardless of what you do. You don't build that attitude without intimacy. And intimacy is not just sex, although it's part of it. Intimacy is if this is you and this is me, and I've got layers that separate us. As we begin to get closer to one another, some of those layers go away to the point that at some point our relationship looks like this. 2 equals 1. And if you draw, hey, this is my circle and this is your circle, what you have in this overlap will gauge and measure the strength of your relationship. And the more overlap you have, the more strength you have there. Okay? Now you can't have complete overlap because one of you is male and one of you is not, okay? But so you have love. This attitude is built on intimacy. Intimacy is that track record of bidding for affection, spending time together, showing appreciation, commitment, communication, all those kind of things. This only comes from a vast experience of trust. You can't be intimate with a person you don't trust. That's why biblically God set it up for couples to be monogamous. Because if you're intimate with people that you don't know well enough to trust, there's a problem. Sexual activity between humans secretes a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is a bonding hormone. That's why the first person you were ever in love with is probably difficult to get over because it's the first time you actually bonded on a chemical, genetic, hormonal level. Okay, so you have love. Love is built on intimacy. Intimacy is built on trust. What's the foundation for trust? Pardon? Honesty? Yes. What else? God, being in agreement on things. You know, when I started trying to figure this puzzle out, and I ended up running into this thing in reverse. You're sitting in your office and a couple comes to see you and they start talking and you know, you're ready to work out the Dave Ramsey budget, or you're ready to do, solve these little problems that you thought you were going to solve problems about when you went to school, and somebody says, hey, he's had an affair. He's been looking at porn. She'd been texting this guy, 80 hours a week. And we've violated trust. How do you rebuild trust in a relationship? And so when you begin to talk to people about who you trust and why you trust and how you trust, the discovery that I made, and I didn't come up with it on my own, I read a thing called The Science of Trust, a study that John Gottman did with the University of Washington. Trust is built on selfish or selflessness. That's how you measure trust. Every single time. And you think about the people you trust, they are people you believe who are not selfish. And you look at the people you fundamentally don't trust, and how do they behave? They're selfish. If you go buy a truck, and this guy tries to sell you a truck because he needs to sell a truck, that's a very different experience than a guy who says, hey, what kind of truck do you need? What you going to do with that truck? Are you going to hunt in this truck? Are you going to do construction work? If he sells me the truck I need versus he just needs to sell a truck, that's a really different buying experience, isn't it? Now you think about when you get involved in a relationship, when you run into difficulties with one another, somebody's giving off selfish vibes. Because when you are acting selfishly in action or attitude, you are broadcasting on an unconscious level, hey, don't trust me. And if I don't trust you, we're not going to be intimate. We don't share, and if we don't share, this attitude goes out the window. Now, I'm not a a shooter. I'm not an operator. I'm not a sworn police officer. I can't get into intergraph, okay? But we had a chief several years ago who called our team leader in and said, why can't I just give 10 guys machine guns and make me a SWAT team? And he didn't understand the chemistry behind the guys that are on that team and trust the guys that are on the team because nobody on that team is selfish. You don't go through a door with a guy you think won't cover your back. You don't go through a door with a guy that you don't think won't cover you when you're in trouble. And you look at any relationship you have, and when you have a component of selfishness in it, it's done. If an eldership governs a congregation from a us versus them, there's selfishness. If a husband makes decisions about the finances and it's an us versus them, any place you find, now there's a normal part of where we're self-centered, okay? Anytime you find out of the bell curve a dose of selfishness, you've got a toxic environment. And you can't have the trust, intimacy, and love until you get a handle on being selfish. We'll cover 2 quick principles on that, and we'll take our first break. Philippians chapter 2. Paul is writing to a group of Christians, and he says this in chapter 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. Okay, so my motivation for doing what I do, number one, can't be on being selfish, and it can't be based on conceit. Now, what's conceit? You ever met anybody that was conceited? You ever met anybody who thought they were all that in a loaf of bread, a bag of chips, or whatever? My grandmother used to say, I'd like to buy him for what he's worth and sell him for what he thinks he's worth. Okay, there's your conceit. Okay, so the apostle says, don't do anything out of selfishness, don't do anything out of conceit. That is, change the way you see yourself. And then notice what he says. But in lowliness of mind, let each of you esteem others better than themselves. So when you start talking about fulfilling this pyramid and creating this intimacy, you change the way you see yourself and you change the way you see others. Don't be selfish, don't be conceited, but in lowliness of mind, I'm going to elevate you as better than me. And this idea of in lowliness of mind, I'm a proponent of cognitive behavioral therapy. You change the way you think, you change the way you live. Period. And I'm not talking about just change the way you think on an intellectual level. I'm talking about change the way you think on a metaphorical, experiential level. If I can get you to do that, I can drastically alter your life. We're doing this stuff now called trauma-informed hypnotherapy, where you're giving people a metaphorical experience where you can talk to me intellectually about stuff and it not really set in with you. You know, a guy gets bit by a dog when he's 8 years old. You know, what's your problem? Well, I'm scared of dogs. Why are you scared of dogs? The dog bit me when I was 8. What kind of dog was it? It was a Doberman Pinscher. You realize a Doberman Pinscher and a Jack Russell are not the same. Yeah, I recognize that. But in his mind, there's enough similarity that guess what? It barks, it's got pointy ears, it's got teeth. I'm still scared of that dog. And you literally have what's known as a neural mohawk. You have this strip that goes through your brain that doesn't touch anything, doesn't even touch your emotions. And you can create 2 neural pathways. The one you talk to Lonnie about in the office, yeah, all dogs aren't dangerous. And then the one you actually operate on when you go outside. And a Yorkie goes, rah, 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 and you run up, okay? What we are doing now, and sometimes we don't even do it with hypnotherapy, we just do it metaphorically. So you sit down with a guy, okay, look, I'm scared of dogs. I believe all dogs are dangerous. It's an inherent feeling. It's an implicit meaning. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. You've been bit by a dog. I get that. Do you know anybody who owns dogs? Yeah. My friend has a dog. Does the dog live inside or outside? Lives inside. Do your friends who have a dog inside their house have children? Yeah. All right, how about those Braves? And you talk about something else. I'm not going to address him on an intellectual level. I've created this thing in his subconscious that does this. He's got a belief that says all dogs are dangerous. And my friends have a dog living in the house with their children. I've either got to go over there dressed like a ninja and kill the dog, or call Child Protective Services. And his subconscious mind will fix that because he can't live with that. And you just give him the idea that you've got cognitive dissonance, and at some point he goes, I trust my friends. They love their kids. They wouldn't have them in a place where their kids are. I had lots of people call me and go, I don't know what you did, but that dog thing's gone away. So when you change the way you, and I'm not talking intellectually, she comes before me. No. This is a fundamental experiential shift that I've got to treat my spouse or my partner as the most important person in this dynamic. Your needs trump my rights every time. Don't do anything out of selfish ambition. Don't do anything out of vain conceit. But in lowliness of mind, esteem the other person as better than you. That's maybe not more valuable, but I'm going to put your needs above my rights. And when that happens on a DNA level, you change the dynamic of your relationship. So change the way you see yourself, change the way you see others. That's the magic formula for solving the marriage go-around when expectation doesn't meet reality. And then the last thing he says in this section is, and each of you should not look out only for your own interest, but also for the interest of others. The simple measure of how much of your relationship is me and how much of it is we is a telling thing about your relationship. I heard Mariel Hemingway speak years ago. She's the granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway. And she just simply said, hey, I want everybody to spell with me the word illness. ILLNESS. Now spell the word wellness. You know the difference between illness and wellness? I versus we. Don't do anything out of vain conceit. Don't do anything out of selfish ambition. In a cognitive shift, in a shift in your consciousness, treat the other person as better than you. When there's more we in this than me or I, you've changed your expectation, because the expectation is not what am I getting out of this relationship, but what am I putting into this relationship. That make sense? Okay, if you go out this door and turn right, it'll spill into our fellowship hall. There's a table there with some snacks and goodies. I hope there's something there that you like. And we'll probably take a 15-minute break and come back in and get started on some more. If you have questions, or this is not going in a direction you thought it was going to go and you need it to change, talk to me at the break, and otherwise I'm just going to plow through what we've advertised. Thank you. by and pulled his social studies book out of his hand. He goes, "You see this book right here?" Down the hall. You know, and she'll turn around and he'll put it like this, and she'll turn back, talk to me, and right behind her. Okay, after that little bit of an introduction, I thought we'd talk a little bit about conflict and solving problems in your relationship, if that's a good direction for everybody. I'm pretty flexible. You'll notice that there's lots of bullet lists on your handouts that we could chase several different directions. But I think a lot of couples want to know, hey, number one, is it bad to have conflict? We're having conflict. Are we doing it right? We're doing it wrong? And that kind of stuff. So is it okay if we do conflict? Here's the shocking news. 70% of all marital conflicts are unsolvable. I'll just let that land in the room there. What we have noticed in modern therapy, and what I mean by modern therapy, at least the John Gottman era, is that if we can change the dynamic between the couple, it really doesn't matter what you're fighting about. And that's across the board. If you have a minor issue and you're positive for what we call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, catastrophic system failure. If you've got a major issue but you don't get involved in the 4 horsemen or the markers for divorce, then that problem should not affect the stability of your marriage. And so we're really changing the dynamic of the way people act with each other. Now, if you read the stuff that John Gottman has done, and then you read the books on emotional intelligence. I'm involved in emotional intelligence based on Carol Dweck's book Mindset, based on the book The Talent Code. And so I've been kind of running into these different circles of thought. Emotional intelligence is a theory that intelligence is not just IQ. In fact, at least 7 different intelligences have been identified. If you have children, quit getting wrapped up in A's, B's, and C's, and ACTs, and SATs. About 70 to 80% of the time, somebody with 160 IQ will work for someone with 100 IQ. Because emotional intelligence, how you deal with and how you get along with people, is much more important in survivability than having a high intellect. Okay? So emotional intelligence is basically defined as the ability to recognize, label, and understand your own emotions, self-regulate through either discipline, delay of gratification, or hard work, motivation. So, choosing between what you want most versus what you want now. So, emotional intelligence, being able to recognize what's going on with me, label those emotions appropriately, and then respond to them with self-regulation, either motivation or discipline. Second component of emotional intelligence is being able to recognize emotions in other people and respond appropriately to them. So this person is hurt or sad or scared or uncomfortable or whatever. Sociopaths don't recognize emotions in other people, and they don't have those emotions. Sociopaths don't have empathy. Sociopaths don't dread. You can put somebody in a thing where if you get the wrong answer, we give you a little electric shock, and a sociopath won't register the dread of the shock. He's like, yeah, whatever. That's why they can do the things they do, because they can't project punishment into the future in fear of punishment. They are emotionless automatons. So go back to the emotional intelligence. I recognize how I feel in this situation, and I can extrapolate how you feel in a similar situation and respond to that appropriately. Okay, that's hot new stuff, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Does it remind you of anything you've ever heard before? Therefore, as you would have men do unto you, do you also unto them. Recognize how you feel in a situation, superimpose that on somebody else, and respond to it. Jesus was talking about emotional intelligence 2,000 years ago. Love your neighbor as yourself. Put yourself in their position and ask, if I were standing where they're standing, looking at what they're looking at, what would I want done? That's emotional intelligence. It's the love your neighbor as yourself principle from Christianity. And so learning to recognize other people's emotions and responding to them in an appropriate way. Now, two things happen here. In a marriage relationship, we want to talk a lot about eliminating some negativities. Okay? The ratio in marriage is 5 positives to 1 negatives. It seems to be the magic number for relationships that work well. If you look at the bottom of the first handout, when it talks about the 5 to 1 ratio, you're really looking at categories. Celebrations versus regrets. When you think about the story of us, I think about me and Jackie. If my thought process is always on the things that I regret rather than the things that I celebrate, you see how that puts a flavor to our marriage. Affection versus resentment. If I respond to her, she responds to me with more resentment or more affection. The us versus me, the illness versus wellness. Am I thinking about the other person more often than I'm thinking about myself? Is my overall view of this marriage positive or negative? Is our life controlled by harmony, or is there more chaos in our life? And then satisfaction or disappointment. You get to choose which of those things you focus on in your relationship. And if the relationship is out of balance and it's not at least 5 to 1 on the positive versus the negative, it's problematic. In some of the writings, the idea of overemphasis on the negatives really, really toxic to the relationship. So when you start talking about, okay, here's a couple and we're going to argue about something, or we're going to conflict about something. What I do in my practice is I call it didactic therapy. Didactic is teaching. Therapy is the therapeutic relationship. Years ago, a guy named John Connolly said, the idea of sitting in your office with a clipboard and nodding every now and then, is not good therapy. He said, assuming that everybody in the world is unhealthy at some level, okay? We're humans, we're flawed. You're going to come into a therapist office and pay the hourly rate, and the more unhealthy of the two people is going to do all the talking. He said, how does that work? How's that a good business model? When I take my car to have work done, what am I paying the guy to do? The guy never comes out at NTB and goes, now today, Mr. Jones, we're going to change the transmission. I'm going to facilitate you as you work on the timing chain. No, I take him to the expert, and what does the expert do? He fixes it. I did have to ask a dentist one time, did she need my help pulling a tooth? But she was a little bitty thing working on this molar I had. But normally you go to somebody, they do. So in therapy, what I want to do is I want to teach you some resources and some skills. So a lot of what I do in my practice is I listen to get enough information, and then I start saying, okay, let me make sure I get this, but it sounds to me like this is what's not working. Here's some resources, here's some tools to fix it. And so what I do first with couples who are in crisis is I go over what I call the 4 markers or the 4 predictors of divorce. Dr. Gottman says that he can sit in a room with a couple for 10 minutes and with 95% accuracy predict divorce. Okay, this is a guy who studies relationships and studies people, and he says, I can predict divorce with 95% accuracy after 10 minutes. And so here's the markers that he uses. He calls them the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. Number 1 is contempt. And this will be on your first page after the marriage go around. It says predictors, John Gottman's 4 horsemen. Contempt is basically seen in nonverbal language. You sit with a couple and you're talking to them and you watch her roll her eyes at him, watch her smirk, watch him go when she says anything. And it's also how you say something. Everybody's heard the phrase, not what you say, but how you say it. Okay? So it's either a complaint or it's either a criticism. Criticism is contempt, complaint is not. A complaint talks about the problem. A criticism talks about the person. I'm self-employed. My boss is easy to get along with. He gives me time off to deer hunt. And so my wife could say, you're never home. Or she could say, I wished we spent more time together. You see how one of those is going to start a fight, one of those is not? And so when you start thinking about, I'm unhappy about something in my relationship, can you state it as a positive request to have needs met rather than some kind of negative thing about the other person? So I'm unhappy about whatever. This house is a mess. I feel less stressed when we have better organization in the house. Okay? And so learning that, okay, and you don't have to be blissfully happy about everything. Okay? But if you're unhappy about something, how you're approaching the topic may start what we call the cascade in the negativity. So the first thing that happens is you get registered with contempt. Contempt feels like an attack. What happens when you get attacked? You get defensive. And so contempt leads to a defensive response. Now, typically when you feel an attack, you get some things that happen to you physiologically. You're never home. You ever had that happen? That's the fight, flight, or freeze response. Okay? And so when somebody triggers an assault cue, whatever it is, and you go, something's happening in your parasympathetic nervous system. By the way, we deal with anxiety this way too. When something triggers an anxiety, when something triggers a threat, what happens to your heart rate? Goes up. What happens to your breathing? Increases. What happens to your adrenaline? You get a change in your pH level in your blood, all those kind of stuff. First thing I ask people who suffer from anxiety is your body working like it's supposed to work? Yeah. When you get triggered with an assault cue, when you've been given an attack, your body wants to make you alert, motivated, or strong. And it doesn't matter if you're going to run or you're going to fight. You have to be alert, motivated, and strong to do that. So I get my anxiety patients to realize, hey, your body's doing perfect. You're scared to speak in front of a crowd, your body's prepared you to run out of that room. You're scared of lizards, your body's prepared you to beat it to a bloody pulp. Okay? Your body's working fine. Make peace with your body. Recognize, hey, my body's doing what it's supposed to do. Now, your mind may have assigned that this lizard is a Gila monster, and it's a brown gecko, okay? Now, there's some stuff going on with your mind. Your body's working perfectly. We get people to feel comfortable with their systems. A lot of the anxiety symptoms go away. But when you get triggered by an attack and you get into what we call diffuse physiological arousal, heart rate goes above 100 beats a minute, your breathing is shallow, your heart rate's thumping, you get overwhelmed with the emotional brain rather than the intellectual brain, you're not making good choices, you're not doing good stuff. A correlation, anybody good with math? Terrible. A correlation, a perfect correlation is 1. correlation doesn't equal causation, but we can say if you've got this, correlated to this is this other phenomenon. And there's some correlation studies. If you've got raccoons and turkeys on a piece of property, there's a correlation, you'll have deer. If you don't have any raccoons or turkeys on your property, chances are you don't have any deer. There's a correlation between the acidity level of water and whether you don't have frogs in your pond. One doesn't cause the other, but there's a correlation. A perfect correlation is 1. If I open my hand, how many times will that marker fall? Every single time. The correlation is that every time I open my hand, it falls. Gravity's the force. Okay? Diffuse physiological arousal, getting overwhelmed and not being able to self-soothe, and divorce has a correlation factor of 0.9. How close is that to 1? So if you're getting overwhelmed, if you're getting flooded with your emotions and you don't self-soothe and you don't take a break and you plow into your arguments that way with the contempt and the defensiveness, you're headed down a dark path. Okay? Now, in order to defend myself, I'm going to try to win. So this becomes a competition. Anybody familiar with the concept of a zero-sum game? Okay, what's the difference between the stock market and gambling? A lot of people use that as an argument for how you can gamble, but really it's not. The stock market's not a zero-sum game. Somebody has to lose. We can invest in the stock market and we can make money or we can lose money. Me and Rick bet on the Iron Bowl. In order for me to win, he must. In order for me to be right, he must be. In order for me to be happy, he must be. So defensiveness often leads us into this competition of I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose, I'm happy, you're sad. Now, so we're talking about my laundry, my hunting schedule, the money we spent, or whether we're not going to go to Thanksgiving at your mom and dad's house or my mom and dad's house, and it becomes a defensiveness thing. In order for me to operate on I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose, I'm happy, you're sad, what does my default setting have to be in my mind? I have to be selfish. When you take a complaint and you translate it as I've been attacked and you move into selfish mode, what have you just done to the trust in the relationship? That's why we talk about the selfishness pyramid first. So now, I feel like I've been attacked, and really you can actually be attacked or just feel attacked. You ever had a teenager go, why are you yelling at me? And you weren't yelling at them, you were just pointing out that they were stupid? I wasn't yelling. You were just an idiot. Okay? So I feel attacked, or I've actually been attacked. I move into the defensiveness. That makes me selfish. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm not trying to solve problems now. I'm trying to win a competition. And nobody wins a competition in marriage. If you keep score, somebody loses. Now, when I get ready to send somebody off to be aggressive or defensive, take a 28-year-old young man, and I'm going to train him to use some lethal weapons. I'm going to send him to the desert. I don't send him to the desert to kill uncles, brothers, dads, cousins, and nephews. I send him to the desert to kill ragheads and Sammys and skinnies. Why? It's hard to kill uncles, brothers, cousins, and dads. It's easy to kill ragheads and skinnies. We take those young police cadets, we put a Q target up, it's shaped roughly like a human, and instead of saying ready, aim, fire, we just simply yell, threat! And they myelinate those nerve endings to shoot at a threat. And when their mind echoes threat, they pull their gun out and they shoot a target. And it's not a person, it's not a husband, it's not a dad, it's not a brother, it's not a cousin, it's a threat. And you can kill a threat easier than you can kill a brother, a dad, an uncle, or a cousin. You've attacked me. I'm trying to defend myself. In order to maintain the energy and the selfishness to keep up with it, I've got to view you in negative terms. that witch, that ogre, that selfish son of a... You always, you never, every time. And so what happens when you get into these unsolvable problems is it's never about the problem, it's about the interaction between the two people, because you've been attacked or I feel like I've been attacked. I move into defensiveness. It makes me default into selfishness. And in order to fight for you from a selfish position, I got to view you in terms that I don't like about you. My lover, my girlfriend, the mother of my children, my sweetheart, the girl I knew since the playground. That's hard to fight with her. It's easy to fight with the Wicked Witch of the West. It's easy to fight with Broomhilda or Maleficent, right? And all of a sudden, just these three little things, if you could eliminate them, changes everything that happens in a fight. Because this is about the other person, me versus you, rather than us solving a problem. That's so simple, it's profound. But do you see how it works? We're changing our view of Philippians 2, change the way you see yourself, change the way you see others. And don't just look for your interest, look for the interest of the other person. And so once this happens, once you start down this cascade into negativity, eventually somebody's going to stonewall. So you can turn toward each other. You can turn against each other, or you can turn away from each other. When these two are happening, you're in trouble. Because instead of me trying to solve the problem, you have become my problem. And so I don't care what it is you're fighting about. I don't care whether it's your budget. I don't care whether it's in-laws. I don't care whether or not your house is clean. Once you start feeling like you're attacked and you start being defensive and you only focus on the negative, you always, you never, every time, and then one of you disengages. One of you stonewalls. Now, there's a caveat here. There's nothing wrong with taking a time out. Okay? Hey, look, I'm overwhelmed. When men start repeating themselves, they're overwhelmed emotionally. We don't swim well in the emotion pool. Okay? We get in the deep end of the emotion pool without our floaties. All right? When that starts happening to a man, it's time to be done. Okay? But don't just disengage and leave it as unfinished business. Set a timer. Hey, here's an egg timer. When it dings, we'll come back. And go do something completely different. Go do a crossword puzzle. Go do a word search. Go do some Sudoku. Go watch some TV. Don't walk around the backyard going, no, you got to let your mind shift back. Because when you get this assault cue and the DPA hits, you move from the forebrain to the midbrain. The midbrain is that animal part that's only emotional. You can't think. You can't process humor. You can't think in logic. Your vision narrows and everything is seen as a threat. And if you self-soothe and come out of that, then you don't end up in this stonewall thing. So if you feel overwhelmed or you feel flooded, it's okay to take a time out, a brief break, and come back. Don't leave it and never return to it. That becomes unfinished business. Does that make sense? Now, I know some guys who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know some guys who are pretty high-level cage fighters. Two guys walk into a cage, and I think that the phrase is you tap, nap, or snap. I think is the way they describe their sport. And they're fighting each other for money. One guy said, when I step into that cage, I think that guy over there is trying to take money from my family. I'm going to pull his head off. In the middle of that thing, what happens if one guy does this? They stop. If two guys who are bloodthirsty animals cannot kill each other just because somebody tapped, Don't you think you and your spouse could develop some kind of a tap-out signal to stop a fight? You know how many couples, we get to fight and we just can't stop. Well, the meanest you-know-what's on the planet can. And it's over. In fact, if I ever get attacked by a guy who I think is trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the first thing I'm going to do is tap. I'm going to see if there are vermin in the building. Yeah. What have you kids been doing back there? Maybe y'all need to teach the marriage seminar. Hey, wow, woohoo! One of those, yeah. Well, hello. Sunday they say Sam Henderson's going to be here taking pictures for the directory. I'm going to tell Jackie, hey, we need to have her pictures made, but I'm going to take her to that room. I'm not going to go to that room. I'm going to go to the other room. Two guys that are bloodthirsty killers can tap and stop a fight. I shouldn't have. I went down a rabbit hole. I had a guy in college, for whatever reason, decided he needed something to prove against me. He announced to everybody there that what level degree he had in Taekwondo or Taekwondo or whatever it is, that stuff that they teach. And so we, went out on the quad, and I was just really honestly trying to walk away, but he decided that, he's going to hurt me. And so I turtled up. He threw about 3 kicks, and I yelled, "Point!" And he celebrated, and I drilled him because he was a Taekwondo tournament fighter, and I knew he responded to the point system. And so when I yelled "point," he celebrated, and I drilled him. But and I'm ashamed of it. I'm not. Anyway, a professional fighter can tap out and stop everything. Work a signal out, whether it's teeing up or turn something over, or say, I'm overwhelmed. Find a way just to say, hey, I'm at this point and I need relief. And you guys can stop the dynamic of a conflict. Super, super easy to do. You've got to be disciplined enough to do it. Another thing I like to do with couples is, if you want to, you can do it with pieces on the table, or you can actually do it in the hallway. Okay, here's you, here's me, and we're fighting, and here's our solution. So what do we need to do about Friday night? Well, I think we need to budget our time better. That got us closer to that. Last Friday night you didn't. No, that didn't move us toward that. That's a vector. And you only make statements that move you closer to your solution, and anything that causes you to go left or right, you call out and you stay focused. Because a lot of us fight, and we fight very inefficiently because we never talk about the problem at hand. We want to chase a bunch of rabbits. That make sense? So everybody understand contempt, defensiveness, negativity, and stonewalling. Okay? Rocco Petrella is a guy that does some work in conflict resolution, and he talks about the ABCs of conflict. That's at the bottom of the next page. A stands for anger, B stands for blame, C stands for competition. It's the same part of the diffuse physiological arousal, because anger is when I allow you to be responsible for my anger. You made me mad, you made me sad, that's not a really valid construct. Okay? You said something, and I chose to respond to it this way. Because if I really could control your emotions, guess how you'd act? Right? If my phone rings and Jackie says, "Hey, honey, I've got the grandbabies, you're in charge of lunch," and I go, "Crap, we're having broccoli again." How much sense does that make? If I'm in charge, what are we having? Yeah, okay, more snacks from Dollar General, It's not going to be anything I don't like. But you made me, oh, really? I get to choose your emotion for the day, and I'm going to choose this? I don't have the ability to make you angry, and you don't have the ability to make me angry. You can press some buttons, but I still have to choose how to respond to that. Other people's words only have the power you give them. Ever. Romans 1:16. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes. if I don't buy into what God has said, it doesn't have the power to save me. It won't affect me. God's words are limited by your response to them. Right? Well, if His words are limited, mine certainly are. And that's people's good words or people's bad words. Other people's words only have the power. So don't let somebody else have control of your anger, and don't let somebody make you responsible for their anger. A is anger, B is blame. I'm not going to take the blame, and I'm not going to blame you for unfortunate things that I've done. And then the anger plus the blame leads to the competition. I win, you lose, I'm right, you're wrong. It's a very simple version of this. A guy named Rocco Petrella did the ABCs, and Gottman does the Four Horsemen. The other important part of getting along with one another and either dealing with conflict or just dealing with the other person's emotions is this thing called attunement. It's at the top of the second handout. And you'll notice that we use the word attune as kind of an acronym. The A in attune stands for awareness. Awareness is simply where you get to label the other person's emotions. Now, does this sound like emotional intelligence again? Recognize your emotions, be able to recognize them in others. All these theories that these people are espousing are running together. I see them all as the same thing with different flavors, which makes me think it's maybe some valid stuff. So your spouse is having some kind of a meltdown. First thing you got to do is let them know, hey, I know what's going on. You're angry, you're sad, you're hurt, you're scared. You may have to ask. There's a beautiful statement. I don't know if it's beautiful, but there's a statement that a hostage negotiator, Mark Goldston, uses. And he says, I bet you think nobody else understands how mad you are, how depressed you are, how sad you are, whatever. And when you say the right word, you'll see the light bulb come on in their face. And they go, you're right, nobody knows how angry I am, nobody knows how cheated I feel, nobody. And once they, in a hostage negotiation situation, it's adversarial. And once that guy gives you his first yes, his first agreement, he's gone from resisting to listening. And he'll go from listening to considering, he'll go from considering to doing, he'll walk out of the building. Same thing with an angry teenager, same thing with an angry spouse, by the way. So you find out and label the emotion. You name the beast to tame the beast. I bet you think I can't relate to how disappointed you are, to how angry you are. Now, once you do that, they're going to unload on you. You're right, I'm angry. You're right, I'm scared. You're right, I'm disappointed. You're right, I'm upset. And so when they tell you that, you turn toward them. It's very, very tempting to turn away when somebody starts spilling that kind of stuff. As men, we're uncomfortable with anyway. You know, I think that what I did or didn't do or said or didn't say, I think that you're hurt. You're right, I'm hurt. It's real easy to go, okay, she's spun up to 400 foot-pounds. I'm going to go somewhere else. You know, I come in and I know Miss Jones is in a mood. It's real tempting to go to the garage and change the oil in everything I own. Okay? Well, you're still changing oil, baby. You know, I'm still in that. No. You got to turn toward them once you become aware of the emotion. You turn toward them. And then number two, you tolerate a view that is opposite of yours. I don't have to agree with it. I don't even have to think it's reasonable. I don't even have to think it's rational. I've just got to be able to tolerate it. This is not a time for me to tell you how silly you are. It's not for me to tell you how ridiculous. I got it. You feel this way about that. And things that are important to her may not be important to you. Things that are important to him may not be important to you. I mean, that's, all that goes back to basic brain wiring. You know, there's some things that are big deal. You know, Jackie, when we first got married, kept talking about spring wardrobe, summer wardrobe, fall wardrobe, winter wardrobe. And it affected her mood not to have, this is my summer wardrobe. My fall wardrobe will be this with a coat. My winter wardrobe will be this with a coat, gloves, and a hat. My spring wardrobe will be this with some glasses. I mean, It is what it is. It does what it does. If it's not earth tones, I didn't buy it, by the way. Okay, so this is a gift because it's not brown or gray. But once I understood, hey, what she wears, when she wears it, and what color palette it goes in, it's very important to her for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know how. Clothing doesn't affect me. You can tell. But when I found out it affected her, I started wiggling our budget around so we had money for wardrobes. This is how oblivious I am, okay? We have a walk-in closet. I have a corner, okay? Part of my corner is taken up by my gun safe, okay? Her dad died. She was in Auburn at a seminar, and so she's going to leave from Auburn and go to Arkansas. And so I said, hey, Derek Horse will bring me to Birmingham. I'll meet you in Birmingham. We'll ride together. That way we don't end up in Arkansas with 2 vehicles, and we can ride back and forth. I said, okay. She said, I need you to pack me some things. I'll pack you some stuff. She said, go to my closet. Go to the blue section. There's a blue section? And sure enough, it's organized by colors on that side of the room. It was really cool. She had a red section and a gray section, a blue section and a brown section. There were open-toed shoes and closed-toed shoes. And since it was after Easter, we could wear the open. It was really, I just didn't know this stuff. It doesn't mean anything to me, but I tolerate her viewpoint. And I think it's important that you don't have to agree with it. You just tolerate it. And then the end is you demonstrate understanding. Understanding is that phase in the communication where you go, I get you. And the other person says, they get me. The men you're married to, ladies, are married to you because they believe on some fundamental level you get them more than anybody else in their lives. We don't have the kind of socialization networks you do. We don't have a lot of people we talk with. You know, me and Taylor go fishing. We'll sit in a boat 4 hours and not say a word. He's not going to turn to me and go, are we okay? Because if he does, he's getting out of the boat. I'm not going in the back room with you. It's not going to happen, all right? We just don't. But when you're doing things with us, you're riding in our golf carts, you're watching us repair stuff, you're watching us compete, you're at the gym with us, when you're in our element with us, we open up to you and we feel like you get us. And at any point we feel like you don't get us, there's a degree of separation. And the same thing is true, gentlemen, about women. Women build intimacy by talking. Men build intimacy by doing. And when you know her favorite color, and you know what her favorite music is, you know where her favorite restaurant. And let me give you guys a hint. Everybody fight about where we're going to eat. Is that where we're going to eat? It don't matter. That's right. I'm going to create a restaurant called It Don't Matter. All right. Well, here's the solution to that, and I hate to say it in front of the enemy. Pick Jackie up from school, and I go, guess where I'm taking you to supper? She goes, Carrabba's. That's where she wanted to go tonight. Works every time. I mean, it's magical. Not, hey, baby, where do you want to go? Because now she's trying to pick for me. And I go, guess where I'm taking you tonight as a surprise. The first thing rolls out of her mouth is where she wanted to go anyway. Okay? Now, I told them where I wanted to eat on my birthday, and they told me I was wrong. Okay? So we left church one Sunday. It was my birthday. Said, where do you want to eat? I said, I want to eat here. They said, no, you don't. That's not a good birthday lunch. You got to eat here. So Lonnie Beth came in last night, and she said, man, I really need to go shopping. I said, well, what am I going to buy you for Father's Day? I said, I think that's appropriate. It's Father's Day. You get a gift. But that's the way it works at my house anyway. But you want to let them know, hey, I get you. And I get you, again, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to think it's reasonable. You don't have to think it's rational. Just understanding that the other person understands me. My wife's scared of the dark. And I address that on all levels of our lives. We have night lights. We have flashlights in my truck. If it gets close to a certain time of day and we're supposed to go for our walk, I'll bring something. She doesn't see well anyway, and in the dark, wow. And she knows I know that about her. And we deal with it. So demonstrate understanding. This doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It just means you got to let the other person know, hey, I get you, And not only do I get you, but I respond to that about you. Does that make sense? Okay. Then the N is non-defensive listening. Once I say, hey, I bet you think nobody understands how whatever you are, and they start spilling, yes, I am. I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm disappointed, I'm afraid, I'm whatever. I don't have to fix that. Well, you shouldn't be. Or it's not my fault. Or I didn't mean to hurt. You just let them pour. Because when they get into that place where they can pour it out, that's the emotional brain talking. It's not the intellectual brain. And you're not going to talk to that brain anyway. Because when we talk to it, we're going to try to talk to them about logic. We're going to try to make it make sense. We're going to try to connect. You don't connect those dots. You let it pour. And eventually it'll run out. And then when it runs out, you offer them empathy or empowerment. I get it. I get you. It's important to me. I understand you. I understand your feelings. How do we cope with it? I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. How do I cope with it? Or is there a strategy we can do to make it feel better? Is there a strategy we can do to overcome this? Is there an option we have? And when it's problem solving, focus on the controllables. Don't focus on the things you don't control. Focus only on the things that you do control. And so we call that the attunement thing. Before I ran into attunement, I used the acronym LOVE. Listen, observe, validate, and empower. Same thing, not as complicated. And so when you talk about conflict resolution, you avoid these, you use these, and then you come up with a solution, or if not a solution, something that if this is ideal and this is unacceptable, it meets somewhere in the middle, hopefully north of the middle. You know, we can't buy a bigger house. What can we do with the space we've got? Okay? We're not going to be able to buy a new car. Are there repairs we can make on this car to make it run longer? We're not going to make $80,000 a year. Let's change our budget so that our budget is $70,000. And by the way, if you make $80,000 a year and you live on $75,000, you'll feel like you're rich. And if you make $180,000 and you live on $185,000, you'll feel like the hounds are always at your door. The number doesn't matter. It's what you do with that number. The very, very last page, we'll talk about after lunch about a little planning thing called the Eisenhower box, where we deal with how we spend time, money, and energy. And I understand the brain can only absorb what the seat can endure. And so it's noon. My plan was for us to just go have a casual lunch on our own and come back about 1 o'clock and then maybe do maybe one more hour. I would be open to say, hey, we're not that hungry. We had junk food. We can stay and then be done by 1. Or if y'all all want to, we'll go down to this little Mexican restaurant and get a big table and we can sit around and talk shop at that table. I didn't know how many people were going to be here, so I hated to ask the church ladies to make food. So we go out and eat if you guys are hungry, and we just sit around the table. And if you don't want to go to, is it La Fuente? Okay, you know, there's Jack's, and we just meet back here at 1. If everybody's comfortable just having a super casual lunch, and then if it's a Saturday, and if you're busy, you need to go somewhere else, you know, it's not like you have to stay for the next session. But if you want to go get a quick lunch, all of us, you know, sit at a couple of tables and visit and fellowship, super casual, and we'll come right back here and wrap up our seminar. Is it okay with everybody? How many of you think you're interested in going to La Fuente? All right, so what, a table for what, a dozen, 20? All right? So let's do that, and then let's plan to be back here as close to 1 as we can, and then we'll wrap up. And thank you guys again for taking a risk to come out on a Saturday. I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been practical. And then if we generate some discussions at lunch that I can address, or we'll plow through the 3 things in the 5 hours that'll change your relationship is what we'll close our seminar with. So let's go eat. Thank you guys. Rick and Lori aren't going to be able to be back. And we lost another couple because of a family reunion. So we'll give it a few minutes, make sure everybody assembles. Those of you who didn't go to La Fuente, we apologize. It took them so long to feed 29 of us. So. Yeah, the guy kept looking at me like, what, are you the only guy who can't get a date? Because all these couples, you know. What can I say? I'm trained in CPR. You go to sleep at your own risk. If you do chest compressions, it's supposed to be to the rhythm of staying alive. Our medic told us you could also play Another One Bites the Dust, and it does the same thing, which I thought was funny. I shouldn't think that's funny, but I did. Yeah. Another One Bites the Dust. Staying alive. I guess it depends on how invested you are in the project. That's Benny or who it is. You coming to the marriage seminar? Go get a girlfriend and come back in. He's gone. He's at, yeah, I better check the room. I better see. Maybe where Rick and Lori's at. All right, we're clear. I was scared to turn the light on. Some things you can't unsee. So, yeah, Rick sent me a text that he had to go. Yeah, I was giving him an update of where we were. You know, they lied to us and didn't ever come back. Well, if you'll go to the fourth page of your handouts, we'll skim some of this because we've gotten a little off of our time slot. The change the way you see yourself, change the way you see others from Philippians 2. I actually got exposed to that for the first time from a guy named Jim Baird at Oklahoma Christian. I was at a conference called Leaders for Christ. I was teaching a section to teenagers, and Jim Baird said, you know, basically in Philippians 2, it talks about submission, service, and forgiveness. And I thought that was very, it was very life-altering for me just to run into those three principles. And I don't know how many different times I've used those three things, submission, service, and forgiveness, to talk about dynamic structures in churches or families. I got invited to write 3 chapters in a marriage book. The theory was I got an old guy, a not-so-old guy, a middle-aged guy, and a younger guy to write 3 chapters each in a book about loving your spouse like Christ loved the church, called The Best Husband Ever. And it wasn't talking about us, it was talking about Christ, although he wasn't married. And my 3 chapters are submission, service, and forgiveness. The other authors are Ben Hayes, Aubrey Johnson, and Cecil May from Faulkner University. Partway down on the middle of that 4th page, you have a survey, or have the summary of the Willard Harley survey that talks about his needs versus her needs. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's a really, really good read. What ends up happening is that, you know, men and women are different, shock, okay? And when they surveyed 10,000 people, I guess it's 5,000 couples, so 10,000 people, and had them take this little survey, what they found out was that the men had, and not 100%, but real close to, you know, these were the top 5 needs for men, top 5 needs for women. With the men, number 1 for the men was sexual fulfillment. Men pursue relationships and get married because they think they're going to be sexually active. And if that doesn't happen on some level, then there's a deep level of dissatisfaction for the male. Michelle Davis has a really good TED Talk on a sex-starved marriage. interesting that as a couple, you decide to buy a house. As a couple, you decide to get a dog. As a couple, you decide to have children. But the person who is least interested in sex controls sex. And so start thinking in terms of this is a need or fulfillment for my partner. And if it's not high on my priority, why should I become the gatekeeper? And I think a lot of times we don't think in those kind of terms. I've even talked to elders, and you'll have an ultra conservative guy on the board, and he's the veto guy. You kind of have a gatekeeper. And so you have the old gentleman who's against everything, so nothing ever gets done because he's not interested in change. Well, the same thing in a sex-starved marriage. The person who is least interested in sex is the gatekeeper, and that needs to be revisited because it's unfortunate that the person with the least interest controls that dynamic. And so sexual fulfillment for a man is a high priority. Number 2 for men is recreational companionship. Men build intimacy by doing. When you're dating, you do things with your boyfriend. You watch him play ball, you bring a plate of sandwiches over while he repairs the transmissions, or at least you talk to him about his adventures. And so when men and women are dating, the girlfriend becomes a recreational companion. You play tennis, you play racquetball, you go for hikes. You don't do everything together, but you do a lot of things together. And then when you get married and she starts nest building, that kind of separates. Well, he's missing his best friend. Okay? And so learning that what builds your relationship will maintain your relationship, and learning to have some us time is very, very important. Number 3 on this survey, and don't throw rocks at me, I didn't create the survey, is an attractive spouse. Men are visually stimulated. And we look, and we like to look. We prefer to look at you. But if you're not helping us, we'll look somewhere else. And that's not blaming you. That's just saying we're dogs, and that's the way we are. And this does not talk about a dress size, and it's not talking about a weight limit. This is simply talking about, do you do your part to maintain your attractiveness? When you're dating, he never sees you unless your hair's done and you got on the right outfit. After you're married, then within the first, month, the terry cloth robe and the bunny slippers show up. I remember the first time I saw that at my house. I said, "Don't move, honey. I think I can get it from here." My mother gave me this, and so it's not about looking like the cover of Cosmo. It's just remembering that when in the dating phase, you make a presentation of your attractiveness, and that needs to be maintained in the marriage phase. 4th on this list is domestic support. Now, you'll give lip service to I have a job, you have a job. I have a career, you have a career. But in the lizard brain of every man, there is that expectation. You're going to do some traditional roles that my mother did. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just simply saying that's an expectation of men. And the household you grew up in and the domestic role that your mom had is sort of an expectation. I do this little survey for premarital couples called the SYMBIS assessment, and it has a list of who's going to do what. And you'll find out that who's going to do what is a reflection of their family of origin. Now, before you consider me a mouth breather and a knuckle dragger when I start talking about traditional roles, about laundry and dishes and that kind of stuff, if there's a bump in the night, who has to check it? You're the exception, Kathy. Okay? If there's a bump in the night, I have to check it. Why? Because I'm the man. Jackie go, "Jonesy, something woke me up. There's a Benelli shotgun in the corner. Go take care of it." She knows how to clear a house, all right? But it woke me up. Okay, let me find what woke me up. Done. She woke me up. I've settled that mystery right there. But no, I got to get the tritium night sights out on the 45 and wander through the house and make sure, I'm in charge of all bumps in the night and all vermin. Why? Because I'm the man. So there's these traditional roles, and although we like to be PC and very modern, there's that expectation that's going to happen. As long as the expectation and the reality are not too disparaging, it won't be a problem. But there is that idea that I want those traditional roles done. And then the last thing on a man's list is admiration. There's a really, really cool Bible story, and because of our time, we won't read it. But David, and what do you know about David in the Bible? Pardon? Loved God. So he's a spiritual leader. What else? He killed a giant. That's a guy that was 12 foot tall, or 11 to 12 feet tall. Weighed probably 1,000 pounds, and David killed him with a sling and a stone and cut his head off with his own sword. When David is running from Saul, he goes to the priest Ahimelech and says, I'm on an errand from the king. I don't have any weapons. You got anything I can borrow? He says, I got the sword of Goliath that you killed in the valley of Elah. You can take it. So David takes the sword of Goliath as his personal battle sword, and the first place he goes is to his town of Gath. Gath is Goliath's hometown. David walks downtown Gath wearing the battle sword of their dead champion. That'd be like carrying the crystal ball trophy down the streets of Tuscaloosa if they didn't have so many. All right? David, his theme song was Saul has slain his 1,000. David has slain his 10,000s. He's a warrior. He's a poet. He's a king. He's an unbelievable battle strategist. When he becomes king and his family's faction and Saul's family faction finally unites, the one thing he feels like he's not doing properly is he doesn't have the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem. And he brings it into Jerusalem. Now there's a fiasco the first time they bring it because they don't carry it properly. But he brings the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and he's in front of the Ark wearing a linen ephod, and he's dancing, jumping up and down. And the Bible says his wife Michal looked out in the window and saw him, and she despised him. He gets the ark in Jerusalem. He gives everybody in the assembly a cake of figs, some meat, and bread. Not just the men, but the men and the women. So this is an opulent celebration. I mean, David has reached the pinnacle of his political career because the factions are together. He's created Jerusalem as his citadel, and now he's got the Ark of the Covenant present in his kingdom. He goes home from this celebration, and his wife Michal meets him on the porch and says, how glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself as one of the base fellows does in front of the handmaidens. Now, I don't think he's being immodest, but I think what she's saying is, look, you brought the Ark of the Covenant into town, and you're out there in your jeans and your T-shirt? Oh, you put a picture show on for the girls in town. David said, first of all, of all the people God could have chosen to be king, nobody with your last name was it, because she's the daughter of Saul. So the kingdom's been removed from your families in mine. If I want to dance before the Lord, I'll dance before the Lord. Loose translation, you think the handmaiden's got a show today? Wait till Friday night. And then the Bible says, and Michal went to her grave childless. Now, what do you think that implies? And what do you have to do to make children? David, the most secure physical male in the Old Testament, gets met with contempt from this woman. And he's done with her in the bedroom. No more backroom visits for David, okay? I mean, he's done. Now, he had other wives, but this was one of his quote-unquote favorite wives. And after she has this contemptuous exchange with him, he's done in the bedroom with her. Ladies, do not underestimate the power of your words to destroy or build up the man you're married to. Be very, very careful with his ego. So, his needs: sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, an attractive spouse, domestic support, and admiration. To sum that up, play with me, look good for me, clean up after me, and tell me how great I am, okay? It's a pretty minor list. If you can't pull this off, okay, don't have children, all right? The reason that this is not so easy to do is because of the flip side of that coin, and it's her needs. And her number one need is affection. And affection and sex are two different things. That leads to sex, but it's not the same thing. It's, does he attune to me? Does he get my world? How much of my interest does he think about? You know, I know where I'm speaking in 2021. I know where I'm speaking, you know, the rest of the year. I know when deer season opens. I know when deer season closes. I know when bow season opens. I know the next 3 times I'm going bow fishing. And I can't remember that the trash truck comes every Monday at 7:30. I forgot to take, you know, I keep up with all this stuff that I'm interested in, and the one thing I do to help her out, I can't remember. She gets the message of whether or not I'm tuned into her. You know, I built this 3-story playhouse with a zip line for my grandson, and the kitchen sink has been dripping for 3 weeks. You're this great engineer when it comes to stuff you want to play on, but my sink still leaks. So it's doing the little things to attune to her needs. That's affection. Number 2 is conversation. She builds intimacy by talking. You build intimacy by doing. So when you're dating and she's in your golf cart or in your bass boat or riding to and fro with you from the game, you're talking to her about your hopes and your dreams and your aspirations, and she gets to know what's going on inside your mind. And then after you get married, what was that? Me? What's the cartoon caption that says, my wife said to me, "You haven't heard a word I've said." And I said, that's a weird way to start a conversation. Okay? You've seen the comedian do the thing about men's and women's brains? A man's brain is a series of little boxes. And his boxes don't touch. And he can't be in but one box at a time. So if I'm in my phone box, I can't be in the talking box. If I'm in my watching TV box, I can't be in the talking box. If I'm in my whatever box, I can only be in one box at a time. My middle box is my favorite box. It is empty. And when you ask a man, what are you thinking? And he says, nothing. He means it. It's legitimate. We can actually sit and think nothing. We can go, that's my favorite box. I love it. It is a good box to be in. I can sit for hours and hours and hours and wait for some deer to walk by and commit suicide because I can just, and it's a peaceful place to be. A woman's brain looks like this. It's like a jumble of wire, and you can't pull one wire that doesn't affect another wire that doesn't affect another wire. I mean, that's just the way it is. You walk into a store, and it says no shirt, no shoes, no service. And my wife will go, she's not wearing shoes. She probably shouldn't get service. We had a nice service on Easter Sunday. On Easter Sunday, Lonnie Beth wore those pink shoes, and we colored those eggs. Eggs. I need to buy eggs at Walmart. That's the way their brains work. Okay? You can't pull a string that all those other strings don't move. Me, I got these little boxes, and it's okay. When you get married, you got to continue to be in your talking box, because she wants answers that are not yes and no. She wants more than syllables. She actually wants answers and not grunts. Jackie teaches school. 9 months out of the year, she can't call me during the work day. 3 months out of the year, she can. So I'm sitting at my office, which is the headquarters of Lonnie Jones International, doing whatever it is I do. And she calls me, Lonnie Jones, hello. And she'll say, what you doing? I'm working. And that sums up my day. I'm working. I'm seeing people who have problems. I'm writing contracts. I facilitated a ropes course. I may go somewhere and do a lecture. It's the stuff I do that people give me checks for. Done deal. And then the phone is quiet. And I have to say, what are you doing? Oh, I slept till about 8:30, and then I made some waffles. You know those waffles that your mom taught me to make that you went to Gatlinburg and she bought me that sweater? Not the green sweater, but the brown sweater. And all of a sudden, she's talked for 15 minutes and covered 5 minutes of the day. With that ratio, I will not live long enough to finish this conversation. But if I don't listen to her, I've told her something. You're not important to me. And so I've got to ask those questions and get details, and I've got to give details. That's the important part of this. So her number 2 need is conversation. Number 3 for her is openness and honesty. A woman can't live with a man she can't trust. Period. End of line. And if I see 100 people in my practice and somebody's committed adultery, 1 out of 100 women will say, I can't believe he had sex with her. 99 of those women will say, I can't believe he lied to me. They don't get that upset that you're tempted by sex. It destroys the fabric of your relationship when you don't tell her the truth. Now, if you want to read an interesting book, it's by Shirley Glass called Not Just Friends. And it talks about the dynamic of affairs. That you spend time talking with another person or texting another person or Facebooking another person or whatever it is. What happens is me and a third party know more about me and my wife than me and my wife know about the third party. And you get what's known as an inverse in intimacy. And it's texting, Facebook, FaceTime, Instagram, whatever. Once you get an inverse in intimacy, you're already on the slippery slope. If you're in a situation with an inverse in intimacy and there's deception, secrecy, or lying already present, it's already an affair. Now, from a theological, doctrinal standpoint, we have to talk about it as a non-sexual affair versus a sexual affair. But as far as psychology goes, you've already broken your marriage vows because you've got the inverse in intimacy and you've added dishonesty to it. It's not a matter of if, but when the sexual part takes place. But it is the destruction of a relationship when you have the inverse in intimacy. So she has to have affection, she has to have conversation, she has to have openness and honesty, and then she wants financial security. Lip service, I've got a career, you've got a career, but in the back of her mind, you're going to be the breadwinner. In the back of her mind, you're going to provide like Dad provided, assuming you come from a traditional household. And so you want to be able to give her financial security. That means you may have to be careful with your budget. It may mean you may not be able to drive the race car anymore. You may have to have only a dozen guns, not enough to take on a small third world country, but you've got to be able to do some things that think about us financially, not just me financially. And then you've got to be willing to work, even if it's not your ideal job. I know guys who are unemployed for a year, 2 years, 3 years, because that job doesn't speak to them. And I don't get that. My dad was the son of a sharecropper, and when he was laid off from one job, he worked 3 jobs to put food on our table. And as a man, that's your responsibility, and it doesn't have to be office work. I can still roof houses if this counseling gig goes south. I can cut grass, I can dig ditches, I've done all that. And you got to be willing to do what it takes to provide for the family. And then the last thing on her list is family commitment. And family commitment is that she's got to believe that you put her first and the children next. And that's a very important. You got to put her first and the children next. You start out by yourself, you have kids, you end up by yourself. If you get that priority out of place and she's not first all the time, then when the kids are gone, you're going to be living in a house with somebody you don't know and possibly you don't like. Okay, I teasing one of my buddies, his third one left home. I said, you're about to be by yourself. He said, we started by ourselves. We like that plan. And so you've got to have family commitment that she believes you'll put her first. In the passage we read to start out our study, leave your father and mother, cleave to your wife, and the two become one. Leave, cleave, and weave. My number one responsibility on the planet is to God. My number one responsibility to God is my wife, my children, my parents, and everybody else gets a number. And a lot of those numbers are double digit, by the way. I skip a few numbers when it comes to priority there. And so that's the his needs, her needs. Now, what you could do is you could take his needs, you could take her needs, and you could randomly select one, and pulling it out of one side is going to affect the other side, and you end up with catastrophic system failure if you're not careful. Marriages that I see that are in trouble end up with somebody who feels like they're a paycheck and somebody who feels like they're the maid. And that's it. The difficulty, if you read this book, is it will give you the impression that if you meet his needs, he'll meet your needs. That is not the intent of that book. And it's been taught in many, many seminars, if your needs aren't being met, you must be doing something wrong. Really? Everything in the New Testament about behavior, love your neighbors yourself, go the second mile, turn the other cheek, is designed to affect your behavior, nobody else's. So don't get the idea that this is entitlement, that if I do what I'm supposed to do, you'll do what you're supposed to do. You do what you're supposed to do because that's your commitment. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do because that's the promise I made, whether or not it ever affects your behavior. Matthew 5:34, you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor, hate your enemies. I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, pray for those who spitefully use you, in order that you may be sons of your Father. I do what I do has nothing to do with your response. I do what I do because I'm consistent with my self-image as a son of God. And your behavior, your response to my behavior really doesn't have any impact on it. I do what I do because of my commitment to God. And I'm going to be the kind of husband I'm supposed to be. It has nothing to do with your behavior. It has everything to do with my promise that I made to my spouse. Okay, so that's the kind of the his needs, her needs. Real quick, right above the bottom, it says Jim Woodruff's Matthew 5 stuff. The summer before I married Jackie, my brother gave me a tape. Those of you under 40, it's a little plastic thing with this black ribbon in it. It goes, and you put in a thing, it makes noise. And it was a guy speaking on marriages. I took notes on it on a typewriter. Those of you under 40, it's this little machine. Okay, and he had to put a whiteout on it. I still have those notes. He took the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed, and turned them into relationship statements. I've done that presentation, I don't know how many times. When I do a presentation somewhere, I write it down on a folder and put the date by it. This is the number of times I've done this marriage seminar. That lesson is this, and the backside, almost out of room on the backside. I don't know how many presentations I've done, but basically he takes the Beatitudes and blessed are the poor in spirit. I was wrong. Blessed are those who mourn. I'm sorry. Blessed are the meek. Let's do what's best for you. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirst after righteousness. Let's do what's right regardless. Blessed are the merciful. I forgive you. Blessed are the pure in heart. I love you, period. Blessed are the peacemakers. I want to be the first to do something positive. And then blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. I will absorb. And that's an old outline that Jim Woodruff did. I've tweaked it a little bit, expanded a little bit, added some actual psychology to it. But it was a life-changing discussion the summer before I married Jackie. And so when you read the Beatitudes, read into them sometimes what Jim Woodruff did with turn the Beatitudes into relationship statements. It's a really, really cool study. And so let's do two things before we wrap up. One is to go to your very, very last page, and this is what we call the Eisenhower box. And you'll notice that it's a little grid with things that are important, things that are not important, things that are urgent, and things that are not urgent. Now, Eisenhower, when he originally did it actually as a box. I've only ever seen it as a quadrant. Eisenhower would say, do, decide, delegate, and delete. This is the decision-making model we use for our time, our money, and our energy at the Jones house. So you have things that are urgent and important. You have things that are important but not urgent. You have things that are urgent but they're not important. And then you have things that are not important and not urgent. So when I start thinking about, okay, this week, this month, this year, how am I going to use my time, my money, and my energy? I think about the things that are important and urgent as having immediate consequences. If you don't do it, something bad's going to happen. If you don't do it, something will be affected today. And that's time, money, and energy. Several years ago, I felt bad that all I ever did with SWAT was wear a Ninja Turtle vest and sit behind the wheel well of a car. And so I went to a tactical medic class. I found a group that was teaching tactical medicine, and I paid the money and went and spent 3 days. And I thought I was going to learn to do, IVs and pneumothoraxes and hemothoraxes and tracheotomies with a pen. I was really excited. He said, no, in tactical medicine, it's bleeding and breathing. If he's bleeding, you stop it. If he's not breathing, you start it. You need a tourniquet and some quick clot and know how to do this to the rhythm of staying alive. And the rest of the time we spent shooting each other with paintball pellets. It was really great. I was good on my tactics. I just didn't know anything about medicine. Well, he said it's immediate consequences. So when you start talking about how am I going to spend my time, my money, and my energy, you start asking what has immediate consequences, and that's what you spend your time, your money, and your energy on. Okay? This, important but not urgent, has delayed consequences. You're going to pay the piper. Okay? You don't have to exercise and you don't have to eat right. But it will come knock on your door one day. Being in shape will not keep you from getting sick or hurt. But if you get sick or hurt and you are in shape, you'll recover much faster. Okay, I'm on my 9th rehab. Anyway, all right. This is something you don't have to eat right. You don't have to exercise. You don't have to make an investment. You don't have to pray. You don't have to attend church where your kids are little. It's very important. It's not very urgent. It will have consequences. Okay? And then you have things that are urgent and not important, and they have perceived consequences. It's the idea that this feels, we got to have a 3-car garage and put a boat in it. Or this is, we got to go to the movie the night it opens. Don't go to the movie the night it opens. The people who wear costumes will be there. You don't want to be at that movie, okay? It'll come out on cable. It'll be seen on DVR and Blu-ray, but these are urgent, but they're not very important. And then things that are not urgent, not important, don't have any consequences at all. As a group, we would probably agree 95% on these 2 categories. What's urgent and important, what's not urgent, not important. I put grass cutting here, by the way. If you don't touch it in November, the good Lord will kill it all. Okay? I'm just telling you right now, why fight God, right? So, at some point, my grass probably needs to be mowed before the Monday night Bible study. My grandkids are home. I'm driving to Nashville tomorrow to do part of the seminar for the next 3 Sunday nights at Spring Hill or Southern Hills. And so this afternoon, I've got to choose to play with my grandkids or cut my grass. Guess what wins? Well, grandkids every single time. We'll be on the zip line or go down to the creek, or if I can get Jackie away, me and Gunnar will shoot pistols. I don't know. He's not 2 yet, but it's not urgent, not important. I'm not, God will kill it all. All right. We do not lose the battles for our souls and our marriages and our families because we don't know about these 2 things right here. I think we're on the same page most of the time. We lose the battle when these 2 things swap places. When the urgent and not important takes the place of the important but not urgent. We spend our money wrong, we spend our time wrong, we spend our energy wrong. We do this as congregations, we do this as businesses, we do this as sport teams, and we absolutely do it as individuals and as couples. This, I think most of us have down pat. The battle for your soul is not won in these 2 categories. The battle for your souls and your marriages is won and lost right here. When you take things that have perceived consequences and let them supersede the things that have delayed consequences. And that's the Eisenhower box. If you want to learn, play with your budget that way, play with your time that way, play with your energy that way, I think it's a super, super helpful tool. And then as advertised, 3 things in 5 hours that'll change your marriage. The next to the last page talks about 5 magic hours. In the back of the book entitled 7 Principles for Saving Marriages, or Why Marriages Succeed or Fail, after all the stuff that he writes about, the author says, and in our studies we found out that really strong marriages boil down to 5 hours a week, which is pretty scary. Those 5 hours a week probably fall under this category right here. And here's the 5 magic hours a week. When you depart, 2 minutes, 5 days a week on, hey, I'm about to leave for work, and my day is going to consist of this. Or she's about to go, what's your day? And just, I'm going to have a meeting, I'm going to work a double shift, I'm going to be gone, I'm going to make a presentation. It's just basically letting the other person know, hey, this is my life today. That way they have some idea of where you're at. Now, don't be shocked if you ask my wife on Sunday morning where I'm at. And she goes, I don't know, he's speaking somewhere. She recognizes that if I'm in, Washington, she can't do anything about it anyway, so she just doesn't file that in her short-term memory. She's got it on her phone, okay, because I always send her text about my schedule. But this is, she knows when I'm making a presentation, or she knows when I'm having a meeting. She knows when it's a client day. She knows when it's a ropes course day. I know when she has a faculty meeting. I know when she's doing testing. And you just spend 2 minutes every day letting your spouse know, hey, this is my day today. Second important session is 20 minutes, 5 days a week on when you get back together. Hey, how'd that presentation go? How'd that faculty meeting go? Did you have a tough day at work? Did you have a good day at work? Just basically letting somebody debrief and decompress so that you are on the same page about what their day was like. I know all of us have had bad days and come in and the other person didn't realize you dealt with trauma or whatever. And so there's a factor there that you want to be able to reunite and do some clearing for that. Then, 5 minutes, 7 days a week, you want to show admiration and appreciation. Now, that doesn't have to be a 5-minute stretch. It can just boil down to 5 minutes. I appreciate you, the kind of mom you are. I appreciate the way our house looks. I appreciate the fact that you work hard. Just some kind of appreciation and some kind of admiration. You're looking at the positive, not the negative, and you want to spend some time every day doing that for your spouse and make them feel appreciated. Make them feel like you have admiration for them. I think a lot of times when I talk to couples who are in trouble, they have the idea that my spouse is not proud of me. My spouse thinks I'm a failure. My spouse thinks I'm a loser. My spouse doesn't think I'm doing a good job. And people need to hear that. If you have children, I think one of the most significant things said in Scripture is when God says, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Your children need to hear frequently and often, hey, I'm proud of you. You're doing a good job. But we tend to want them to be better, so what do? Oh, you made an A? Boy, it would have been nice to have been an A+. They don't hear, I think you're smart and can do better. They hear you failed. And so try to find a way to give them appreciation and admiration. And then 5 minutes a day, 7 days a week, physical affection. Non-sexual touching. This is just hugs and handholds and foot rubs and putting your arm around their shoulder. Just human physical contact where the other person feels affection. Okay? And for the younger guys, yes, you can touch and it not have an agenda. Just saying, all right? But they need that, and it's good. And just chasing a rabbit. If you go to church with people who are widows, think about living your life without being touched. If you have widow ladies in your congregation, walk up and hug them. Hold their hand and walk them to the parking lot. Pat them on the shoulder, because they were married at one time and they get up every day and don't have a hug or a goodbye kiss or anything. So when you see them at your congregations, or if you know some widow ladies in your neighborhood, don't be afraid to walk out there when they're at the mailbox and give them a little hug, or pat them on the shoulder, or hold their hand, because physical touch is super, super, super important to the health of people. And then 2 hours every week, you should do what's known as love mapping. And love mapping is where you, during the week, have blocked out enough time that you are involved in the other person's world. For 99 cents, you can get on your smartphone and download the Gottman Institute app. And you can take a little quiz called the Love Map. And I can name my partner's best friends. I know where your dream vacation is. I know who your least favorite in-law is. And it's what do you know about that other. It's how much time have you spent talking to your partner to find out what you know about their inner workings of their lives. And so 2 hours every week you spend getting insight into that person. Now, you used to know everything about them when you were dating. That may have faded over time, especially the longer you get away from the I do's. But that's what we call the 5 magic hours. And then the 3 things that I want to put before you comes from 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13, and by the way, normally my seminar includes Ephesians 5, 1 Peter 3, Philippians 2, the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. I knew that some of this material was repetitive for my folks from Meridianville, so I didn't cover that section, and we also wanted this to be for our community, and so I wanted it to be a little more lecture and a little less preachy. If you want the second half of that, sometime holler at me, and I can do that. But in this section, 1 Corinthians 13, and for those of you who are from the community, not from a religious background, the Bible was not written in chapters. It was written in whole unit thoughts. Translators divided it into chapters to keep up with how they were translating it. If you read and study your Bible, look at it in macro thoughts before you start trying to pull it out and do a 3-point sermon with it. Okay? You know, what's the whole thought? And then that whole thought is built on some individual principles. 1 Corinthians 13 is really the second half of 1 Corinthians 12. He's writing to a group of immature Christians and who in the first century had the ability to do miraculous gifts. But instead of using their miraculous gifts to go out and teach the gospel, they were coming to church and having a party. It was show and tell. So a guy would speak in tongues or somebody would do a prophecy, and it was like they were just showing off at church. So he tells them in what the English Bible calls chapter 12, everybody can't have the same job. You can't tell somebody that you're not important, and you can't say, I don't like my job, I quit. Those are the 3 things he outlines in chapter 12. And at the end of chapter 12, he says, look, everybody can't be an apostle or a prophet or a person who speaks in tongues or a person who heals. He said, but I tell you the one thing you can do. Everybody can love. And that's how it ends. That's how 1 Corinthians 12 ends. But I show you a more excellent way. And then chapter 13 starts, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and don't have love, it's nothing. If I have this great gift of prophecy and don't have love, it's nothing. If I am philanthropic and even donate my body to be burned and my motive is not love, it's nothing. So he's talking about an attitude that produces effects in our lives. And then he describes love. 1 Corinthians 13:4. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs, it does not delight in evil, it rejoices with the truth, it always protects, always trusts, always perseveres, and love never fails. 15 different descriptions of the idea of love in this chapter. Those 15 descriptions can be put into 3 categories. And so here's the 3 things that change your life. Endurance, humility. I can't spell initiate. Can somebody help me? I just had brain gas. I left out a T. Initiate good. If you take everything in this list from 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, you'll put it under one of these 3 words. Endurance, humility, and initiating good. This is the attitude and the commitment that says, I don't care what's going on, I ain't going to quit. This is the ability to say, I'm going to change the way I see myself. I'm going to change the way I see you. I'm going to put your needs above my rights. And I'm going to set myself in a place where I'm a servant. I'm going to serve my spouse. And then I'm going to initiate good. I'm going to see the world from your perspective, and knowing what I know about you, knowing what I know about your needs, knowing what I know about your wants, knowing what I know about your likes, I'm going to initiate good and try to be the first to do something positive. Everything that can be said about love in 1 Corinthians 13 falls under those three categories: endurance, humility, and initiating good. Now, you take those three things, name me an environment where that wouldn't work. If you did this as customer service, if you did this in community policing, if you did this in social work, if you did this in customer service in any business you have, I'm going to put up with the squirrels. I'm not going to act like you can't do this to me, and I'm going to always anticipate their needs and initiate good. You know what kind of company you build? You know what kind of impact we'd have on the community if the church did those three things? Not just within ourselves, but to everybody else. Endurance, humility, and initiate good. The three words are the three things that will change your marriage. So rather than going into the marriage thinking this is what my spouse needs to do, this is what I need to do. Practice endurance, practice humility, and initiate good. And then just kind of as a wrap-up thing, I usually ask couples on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, where's your relationship? What would it take to change that number positive one direction? I used to ask the question, what could you do to change that number? Because usually it's what would change that number. If he would do this or she would do that. It's what could you do that would change that number positive one direction. I even changed that. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, what would your spouse say you could do to change that number one step positive? Now that involves attunement, that involves listening, that involves knowing my spouse and what they wished I would be better at, and it involves the ultimate example of initiating good. It's 2:30. As advertised, we'll be done. If you have questions, I'll take them now, or I'll hang out as everybody leaves. Thank you guys for coming. I hope this has been beneficial. I hope it's been useful. Hope it's been practical. And I hope that if we get to do this again, you'll spread the word and ask folks to come and be with us again. Thank you guys again for coming. I thank our elders for letting us be here, but he had to leave and go to work. And thank you guys for taking the time out of your day. If you have any questions, you can contact me at either number. This is my office, and this is my cell. This guarantees privacy. Gunner plays with this one. And he can't read right now, but this is 100% private. Nobody reads that but me. You can have access to me anytime with that. And if you need me or want me, it takes voicemail and text, and I would like to serve you in any way that I can. Thank you guys for coming. And Taylor, thank you for lunch. Taylor bought my lunch, so y'all be good.